I wanted to share with you, yep, the meeting is being recorded. Thank you, Jenna. Thanks, Jenna, for all of your support today. Can't do this without you. A couple reminders. One is to share with the group when something resonates, because this is such an impersonal space, right? How do we, all the ways that we can try and make it more personal. So when something resonates or it gets you excited, like thumbs up, jazz hands, you know, yay, really try to be expressive. It helps get that feedback. I think for me, that's been one of the hardest things, because I do so much training in person and I get so much out of the feed, you know, from the people around me. And so going to virtual conversations, that's been the most challenging thing, is being able to read how people are feeling. So we've been trying to come up with creative ways. Hi, Karen. Nice to see you, Karen Johnson. I'm glad you could join us. Yeah, so that I just wanted to remind us of that. And then would also like to do a community check-in like we did last time, and just see how everyone's feeling. Because again, like trying to start, especially with a big group like this, I don't want to forget to slow down. This is where I always lean so heavily on Emily, because she reminds me to slow down and check in, right, with our regulation and ourselves. And so I'm trying to always embody that. And just to check in with you and have you guys check in with yourselves as a group, and put in the chat, how's your weather today? Let's do a weather report. Like, are you cloudy? Are you sunny? Is it turbulent? And just let everybody know how you're feeling. I think it's always really important to do that in a group. And it's just, that's again, like, I'd love to hear if you guys have creative ways of doing that virtually with so many people. Because I want to keep doing that. I'm going to share with you our visual summary from last week before we kick off into today. And thanks again to Stephanie for doing these. She's with us again today. So last week, really the theme that popped out was dreaming with our eyes wide open. So really trying to, we had spent a lot of the first 3 weeks focusing on regulation and relationships, and both how we're doing that now, and how we're connecting with families, and then how we wanted to continue doing that, of all the things that are working well, how we wanted to continue doing that in the fall. And we spent a lot of time last week really thinking about, it was a really interesting mix for me of both being able to be honest with each other and really share kind of where we're at the moment, what things are scary and hard and stressful about thinking forward, and what we really wanted to bring forward. And what really came out, what jumped out at me last week from our conversation, was the need for peer support. So thinking, I mean, of course, through every conversation we've had, this thread of prioritizing our mental health, our well-being for both adults and kids, and being really attuned to that when we come back is going to be more important than ever. But also this idea around peer support. So how do we, like, and someone brought up a great point, that's what we're doing here, right? We're collectively giving each other support and finding a way to have these conversations. So how do we do that when we come back? And how do we make sure that kids get some peer support too? With older kids, with younger kids, how do we set time aside? And I loved the comment from New Zealand, who has started to open schools a little bit, that just the awareness of what the kids have to do when they go back into the building itself was kind of scary and weird for them. I hadn't really thought about that until she brought that up. So yeah, these were just some of the things that really stood out for us, and I want us to continue thinking about as we go forward. I'm going to stop sharing that screen. Amy, rainy with a mix of COVID angst from my teens. I totally empathize with that one. Yes, that was a great one. We're going to try some breakout sessions again today, and I wanted to try to figure out which one I want to do first. So I wanted to bring back, someone asked me the other day, thinking about thinking about SAMHSA's 6 principles of trauma-informed care and how we in the past had thought about trying to bring that into a school building. What does that look like? What does safety look like in a school? What does trust and transparency look like in a school? And I wanted to kind of circle in on that because I think now more than ever, thinking about that in a whole new way, I think there's going to be things that come up that didn't come up before. So I wanted to share, I did a quick little illustration here, and I would love to hear some thoughts. I'm going to try and do this on present mode. Okay, hopefully you can see that. These, very briefly, are their 6 principles. So maybe the subtitle of this is SAMHSA's 6 principles of trauma-informed care in the time of a pandemic. So if this is how we do a framework for setting up a trauma-responsive school, what might we need to consider as we think forward to the fall? And even actually right now, that would be fine too. But how do we create safety psychologically, physically? How can we be trustworthy and show transparency? And we talked about peer support, right? That came up loud and clear last week. How can we support collaboration? How do we give parents and kids and teachers voice and feel empowered? And how do we continue to be aware of the cultural, historical, and gender issues? And I feel like all of this keeps coming up every time we talk. We've talked about the disproportionality and how the pandemic is affecting different communities and how digital equity has been a huge factor right now for people in rural areas that can't, teachers can't connect, kids can't connect. And so everyone's been trying to do their best, but feeling like they're challenged. So I think for our first breakout, I would encourage you to pick 2 of these that really stand out for you. And as a small group, think about how we might keep these in mind as we move forward. And you're welcome to put stuff in the chat as always. And I will say that we did figure out how to put you guys back in the same groups. So when we do a breakout later, we'll make sure you end up back with your same folks, because I think that will help in community building. And just discuss how we can use this framework to support what we're trying to do in this current time. And then we'll come back together. I'm going to stop sharing the screen. Whoops. Stop share. There we go. Okay, so we're going to try breakout, and we're going to try, Jenna, let's do 8 minutes.
8 minutes? Okay, perfect.
Yeah, let's do 8 minutes, and we've got 54 people. Let's try, what do we have the group set at?
It should be 5 to 6 participants per room.
Perfect, I think that's great. So when you see the little invite to join the group pop up on the screen, just click that you'll accept the breakout session, okay? Any clarifying questions? Introduce yourselves. All right, go.
Trying to remember what, I'm Heather Crawford. I'm an early childhood mental health consultant in Massachusetts, working in preschools and daycares with teachers, parents, and families. I wasn't totally clear on what we should be talking about.
So she had, I'm Laura Lockhart. I'm Area Director of Student Services in Keller ISD. I guess that's where we could start. Let's go around and introduce ourselves.
I'm Carrie Carpenter. I'm a clinical mental health counselor and also currently an elementary school counselor from Pueblo, Colorado.
Oh, lucky you. I'm Lori Casanova. I'm a high school counselor. I handle currently 3 non-public schools.
And I'm Karen Johnson. I am a social worker and worked in the field for about 20 years in Milwaukee, in schools and other community-based services, et cetera, foster care, a lot of foster care. And I have, for the last 6 years, been working in the trauma-informed services space as a consultant, a trainer, technical assistance type person. So, yeah. Very interested in this, in all that you're doing in schools now and trying to make it better for the future, for the return in the fall. So thank you.
I think that's one of the biggest things that's been heavy on my heart is how we come back effectively to, at least in my perspective, to K-12 public education. We don't even know what it's going to look like yet, so we're kind of planning for things that we're not even sure. What I do know, and I've had a lot of conversations about, is the fact that we need to acknowledge, the loss and the grief of losing what is normal, and then how do we build in supports for the students as well as the adults throughout the school year. And so something that, when she had her little 6 boxes that resonated with me, and I've been working hard with my counselors and my SEL teams and all of those sorts of things. And we've been kind of putting frameworks in place and things like that for principals to be considering. But that peer support, for whatever reason, today, it just popped out at me as far as making sure that we're intentional about getting people together and connected. I think we generally knew that, but I think we need to be a little bit more intentional about that.
What struck me is that a lot of us are working in schools, and with children, what struck me from those 6 principles or whatever of trauma-informed care, they weren't really like developmentally specific to different age groups for children. And I was kind of just thinking about how important development is and in what kind of expectations we can have of the kids once things do reopen. Just hearing about, the commissioner in Massachusetts talking about trying to get the kids to, these toddlers to socially distance from each other. And, it just doesn't, some of these things aren't possible to implement, for all kids across the board. And we just need to take that into consideration, I think, too, when we make our plans.
I think when I look at those principles, safety obviously always comes up, and safety in so many ways is going to be of incredible relevance. As as I've been talking to other service sectors that are coming back online, like dentists and hospitals are starting to do their non-essential stuff again, and people are scared and they're wishing they could stay home, but they can't now, and they're not. And so how to ensure, to the best of an organization's or schools or district's ability, that people can have a certain degree of safety, the physical safety, so they're not obviously getting COVID, but then emotional safety, psychological safety, they're able to share their concerns, they're able to admit, share their fears, grief, loss, all of that, create cultures that honor that, I think will be really important.
For me, I think safety's come up a lot. Some of the things, working in trauma, thinking about, our kids have been basically, and we all have been told, even ourselves with our teachers and everything, that we're not really safe except for the people that we've been with when we've been isolating and stuff. So I'm wondering how that's going to look when we say go to a trusted adult, but then perception is of how they're seeing it has been forever changed. So as coming back into school, how do we help them with that? How do we identify and how do we help them migrate through? And I've been thinking about a lot of thinking about therapy techniques, but not providing therapy, and what we can do about intentionally of giving people some tools and what that looks like. So my brains have just been turning and heavy on my heart, and I'm like somebody else. I'm not sleeping well because I'm like, how can I help?
I'm concerned about the international student population that we have at 2 of my schools, most of which are Asian students, and quite a few of those specifically from China, that were already starting to experience some, I don't know if bullying is the right word, but some pushback from some of the students even before we went out of school. And if they return in the fall, I'm concerned about what they're going to be facing with our students.
Are your schools talking about the possibility of not returning in the fall? I think that's on the table probably for most districts as well, but people just don't know. Or is it pretty certain where you are that you're going to be in face-to-face?
My schools are looking at, well, I have 3 schools, and the one is looking at kind of a hybrid model of potentially returning half days for kids, or having half days online, and I'm not sure what that's going to look like. And my other 2 schools haven't even started planning, so we have no idea what they're going to do.
No idea.
No.
So we're in Texas, and so a little bit more, I guess, aggressive in some of the opening stuff. So right now, we're supposedly opening, but there's conversations about the half day. There's conversations about every other day. I'm not sure how that's going to look in elementary. I have one of my kids is still in the system, and so I can see him easily. He drives, that's not going to be a big deal. I worry about the littles, of how to keep them safe and engaged, and they can't, many families can't be home with them.
No.
And so, and then even, as privileged as we are here sitting in this space, I know his friends, he's got friends that are having to work now. So, it's just, I'm not sure how this is going to look. I know we need school. I know we need connection. I know there's been some discussion that do we even need brick and mortar? And I think if anything, this has shown that we do. We need relationships and connections and safety and those basic needs met and all of those sorts of things in addition to, advancing our population. So I don't know. A million things have
All right, welcome back, everyone, as we start to filter back in. Well, I hope that for all of you, your breakout session was as fruitful as mine was. That was amazing. I was really struggling with what prompt to use this morning. I just had that dilemma, and I'm really glad I picked that one because it has come up quite a bit lately. So I will share kind of some of the highlights that came up from my group, and then I would really love to hear from some of you, because this is, I really want this to be a discussion, not just listening to me yammer. So our group, what came up first was safety. Like, that was the big glaring, like, We have to pay attention to Maslow's hierarchy, right? Safety, 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 physical and emotional safety. And peer support again, right? That thread from last week. And there was an interesting suggestion, I like this a lot, that, you know, at their school, they had set time aside in the schedule for staff self-care in the past, even before this. But that when they come back together, or even virtually if they could, like, how do you set time aside for students to think about that in their schedule? And this was a high school, but yeah, like introducing that concept with them and setting time aside. My son's school has been setting out, the advisory teacher has been sending out wellness tips and check-ins every week with the kids, which, you know, I have a 16-year-old son. He's like, yeah, whatever, I don't know. But I love that they're doing it, right? And so paying attention to that with the kids, I thought was great. And then holding, again, this, you know, this was really strong last week, holding space for the pain right now and being able to put language to feelings. You know, again, like that was huge in our conversation last week. So it was really interesting to hear that come up again. And how do we make sure that we do that now? And how do we make sure we do that when we get back together? And then the cultural awareness piece, you know, a lot of parents are feeling a tremendous amount of pressure that they're not doing enough. You know, they want to do enough. And especially if they have extra challenges that they're facing economically, you know, they've been having a lot of breakdowns, personal, you know, people have had personal interactions with parents where they're just, you know, they feel like they can't do enough, well enough, they're not keeping up. So how do we get that message out that we are doing enough, they are doing enough? Yeah, so those were some of the things that really stood out for me in keeping the framework in mind. I'm going to open up the chat. Is there anyone else that would like to share what their group talked about? And you can either like raise your hand on the screen or raise your hand virtually, and then Jenna and I will try to get to you. All right, Kristen. All right, Kristen, I'm going to try to unmute you here. All right, you're unmuted.
Awesome. We our breakout was fascinating, and just thank you so much. And what I learned from Jacqueline and we discussed was well, first, Quebec has opened up the schools this past Monday, but Jacqueline was talking about equity and how there's a 90% poverty rate in the district that she's working with, and that many families they had connectivity issues. They don't have devices, and those that didn't have devices, some didn't want to have the devices delivered to them, and not just out of fear of the 6 feet separation, but just they didn't want people to know where they lived. So that I felt was fascinating. How do we keep the equity portion of education up if kids can't even have the way that the electronics to make it work?
Right. Great. Thank you for sharing that. Anyone else would like to share what their group talked about? Amy, let me see if I can, hold on, let me unmute you. Okay, go for it.
Hey everyone, our group talked about something that kind of addresses the safety concern, but also falls into a lot of other subcategories there as well. When it comes to talking to kids about what is a new norm in terms of behavior that keeps them safe, we also have to be sure to consider a developmentally appropriate context and explain to them why we're doing what we're doing and how we're going to do that and how it's going to help keep them safe. Because as I'm consulting with schools, what I notice is that, teenagers cluster, right? And 4-year-olds hug, and middle schoolers, run in gaggles. And so we have to be able to provide them a context for why we're asking them to do something different. Otherwise, we'll naturally increase their stress and anxiety, which can create a lot of long-term ripple effect if we're not engaging in developmentally appropriate behavior, and when they can't be developmentally appropriate, explaining to them why and what they could do differently, right? Not eliminating a behavior without giving an appropriate replacement behavior and an appropriate explanation.
Yeah, that's totally true. Someone, I think it was Lara Oberman, great name. You had a tweet earlier this week that really stood out for me about, I think it was in France, right? Kids playing in little squares. They had like drawn chalk lines on the playground, and the kids were sitting inside their own little squares, just like playing by themselves. And it was actually really sad. It was like, and they were like, I don't know, second graders or something. So it was kind of like an interesting commentary on, a return, but a return at what cost and to what and for what, at that, if that's what it's going to look like. How do we explain that? Yeah, that's really a good point. Anyone else would like to share? I know there was so much brilliance going on out there. All right, Charisse, I'm going to unmute you. Hold on. Whoops.
Thank you.
Right.
I think most of us spoke about just cultural, historic, and gender issues. I think two of us are in more rural areas where I know in my rural area it's not very diverse. If it weren't for the university here and the engineering firm, the big engineering firm, there probably would not be any diversity at all. And so, especially around the country, as you hear about different pockets of areas where it's so inequitable and like so many populations are dying at higher rates because of it. And like, how do we, because I think in this small town, like people are so isolated and it's like, well, outside of Pullman, we don't worry about what happens outside of Pullman, but not many of us are from Pullman, me included. And so, I do have people in other communities that I hear about and that affect me greatly. And then, trying to then explain that to my teenage daughter and then trying to get her to feel free to have, like, she just lost a friendship this week because of, she had a conversation with one of her friends about Ahmaud Arbery, and it just went really bad. And so now they're not friends. And that makes me sad that our young people can't have conversations about stuff like that affects them without losing friendships.
Right.
And now she's being bullied by this girl and her sister. And I'm like, really? And so it makes me sad that this is like, how are we teaching our young men and women to have dialogue and to talk about things that matter to them without then going to this really weird place of bullying and, crank calls and all this other stuff. And as a mom, like, how do I handle that without like going through the roof and wanting to go choke this little girl? So I just, I think it's an ongoing dialogue that we just need to have with our kids and say, look, everyone's opinion is maybe different from yours, but we can still be respectful of one another's space. So
yeah, that's great. Yeah, that is, most adults have really a challenge with that. So that's really, really great. I love it. Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah. God, there's just lots of great conversation happening even in the chat. Ellen, what you mentioned about trying to spend the first, week or two of school only paying attention to social emotional needs and trauma, like that's, if I had one wish, like if I could wave my magic wand and be in charge, right? That would be the one thing I would do, is to make sure that we had time to not do any academics for 2 weeks and just recover. So if anyone knows how to make that happen, let me know. But at least 2 weeks. Okay, Chris, yes, you waving your hand, and then yes, okay, great. Chris, go.
In my handy dandy little town here in Kansas, we are the host of the Kansas State Fair every year. And so I spend I know I'm not going to have a routine at all because kids are going to stay up late and they're going to eat junk food at the fair. So I spent about the first 6 weeks building a community and fostering relationships. And I do things and we do crafts, but I don't dig into our curriculum until after we're into a routine and the fair has packed up and moved away. So that's how I run it. And it has worked really well since we've been here 9 years now.
Yeah.
And then the parents don't feel pressure to get their kids to bed at a decent time because they know that I'm not doing any of the rigor yet.
Right.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah. When I was running an alternative high school, it was small and it was just me and one other teacher. So we had all the freedom we wanted, and we never did anything but team building and project adventure and challenge by choice and all of that stuff for at least 3 weeks. But we had the freedom to do that. And we knew that if we didn't do that, I mean, our kids were coming to us of very high poverty. All of them had, they were teen parents, had been pushed out of school. They had to process that and become a tight-knit group before we could get any learning done. But I know that that's true for everybody.
Right.
And especially in the situation we're in right now, we have to be able to, and like Kat brought up in the chat, like we have to do this with staff first. And we have to, heal and spend time and hold space. And then we have to do that for students, or none of that academic, focus is going to happen that we want to happen. All right, before we break out in our second breakout, is there anyone else, I'm trying to look as fast as I can, that really wants to share in that framework? Kristen.
One question.
Okay.
How are we going to gauge the mental wellness of the students? How are we going to administer the Beck anxiety inventory, self-reports? How are we going to gauge that? And then as counselors or teachers, how are we going to get buy-in to all the teachers to allow those kids to take those tests or have, counseling sessions? What is everybody going to do?
That's a great question for
I'm actually, my position right now, I'm finishing up a PPS, which is the credentials, so that I can actually counsel. I have a master's in educational counseling already, and I'm writing my final right now. And I have to do a final on tests that you can be used. Now this pandemic has just opened up a whole new can of worms. So I want to know, everyone, what you guys think is going to be the easiest way to gauge where the kids are.
That's a great question. So yeah, feel free to put them in the chat. And when I want to do our breakup, and then when we come back together, we can have an open discussion. That's a great question. And in fact, I wanted to, Pam Black, help me here. I really love the question that you asked a small group of us on the internet earlier this week. Do you want to share that with the group for ponderance? Hold on, let me unmute you. There you are.
Hi, thanks, Laura. Yeah, I've been asked by a school district in Iowa if I knew of any surveys about that would get at people's concerns, things they needed in place before they felt that their children should go back to school, or for the staff for them to go back to school. So I find that very timely, because I've heard lots of groups talking about what we should do, but I wonder, soon in the next month or two, it's going to be time to ask everybody else. So I wonder if anybody has run into anything like that. I am currently making a list of questions a bank of questions, but if anybody has anything, I would love to know about that.
Yeah, and that's what I said to Pam when she reached out. I was like, well, let's make our own.
Yeah,
because I think that's
probably do.
Yeah, I was like, we'll just make one, because I think that is so important, is trying to, we need to hear, we are talking about our hopes and dreams, and we are talking about, how we're going to go and do this when we come back. But I think we do, if we can figure out a way to hear from from teachers especially. What do they need? What do they need? You know, I know, and a lot of our group is school support staff. We do have teachers that join us too, but I would really love to hear, find out, and from parents, how do they feel? What do they need to feel safe? You know, what do I need to feel safe to send my kids back to school? Those are all really good questions, Pam. So I hope that. Yeah.
I hope you guys have some ideas.
All right. So I think in our last breakout with our groups, I would like to continue the same thread. If you only got to talk about one last time, then talk about your second one. And if you got to talk about both, pick another of the principles, and I'm going to share them again really quick so people can remember. Because I think, at least from my group, it felt like we had a lot more to share of ways that we can keep these in mind when we return. And as always, I leave it open to the groups too. If one of the questions that just came up from our audience seems like what you really want to dig into, then go for it. All right, so we're going to break again. Let's see what time it is. It is 12. Let's do 7 minutes, Jenna.
Sounds good.
Okay. All right, everybody. So join your groups and I'll see you back.
Anybody feel strongly about?
I mean, I guess for me, I was thinking a little bit about the trustworthiness.
Yeah.
And in relation to safety specifically, because like right now I live in Massachusetts and we have like a large infection rate here. That's just only starting to kind of go down right now. And we're already talking about reopening in our state. And it, you know, all this talk about like, yes, we do want to build those feelings of safety, that felt sense of safety for the kids. But if it does turn out that we reopen and have to shut down again, you know, because people are getting infected, will the kids then feel like they can't trust adults when they say it's safe? You know what I mean? Like that's kind of where my mind is at with wanting to be transparent and in a developmentally appropriate way with the kids about what's happening.
So much of this feels out of our control. I know here in Pennsylvania, our governor has us on stay-at-home orders until June 4th, but individual counties have decided to go against that order, and including the county I live in. And so they're moving us from a red level to a yellow level, with the county commissioners are doing so. And it's all about politics.
Yeah,
it's all along political lines. And, you know, how do you teach kids that they can trust us when they can't even trust their political leaders? And how do you teach them to be respectful of law when the political leaders in the counties are going against the governor? There's so much that feels so out of control here for me. I
wonder, you bring up a really good point. Because like I said, I'm in Texas, and so that politic thing is kind of a big deal. And as far as alignment with some of those beliefs, I'm wondering, you know, one of the boxes is about empowerment and choice. And so, you know, maybe having ongoing and honest conversations about, you know, what you can control, what you can't control. I don't know, I'm just brainstorming. Just because I think, looking at a lot of the stress conversations and the, worrying, resilient stuff from Goldman, all of those sorts of things. I just wonder if, and I don't know the answer, I don't know how to have those conversations, but maybe start looking at how to help kids and staff control what they can control and accept what they can't, and then, because that's really all we can do.
Right.
And I mean, that's a really good point. Really good point. I mean, I have a 21-year-old from a college home, and then a 18-year-old who's about to finish up. And, those are conversations we have a lot about, not necessarily trusting our political leaders, but what can we control and what can we do, to help. So I don't know, just a thought.
No, that's a good point.
Yeah, I think the locus of control, giving that to people to the best of our ability and helping them identify what is within their control and not is very, very helpful in those conversations, intentional conversations about that, and teaching kids about that, I think could be very powerful. Staff, of course, as well. That dynamic is certainly prevalent in Wisconsin, the state. I'm not living there now, but that's where I'm from. So I hear it. I mean, last night there was the Supreme Court overruled the governor. So, it's just on and on. And so trust. I think the question last time about, I don't know who shared it, but how does a child know what adults are safe to go up to or who they can trust? I think Laura's point about spending a good amount of time on that those first 2 weeks could be really helpful and important.
I totally have to agree. As a school counselor, I've been talking to my principal about it, and I'm very consistent with my lessons and everything. And we're going to take a different take on like mini lessons, like going in every classroom. We have 22 classrooms, and going in and tag teaming that to 15-minute mini lessons. And then I think like with the staff, the more I've been thinking about it, the circle of control, all those great activities, but also I think we're going to have to help them build a belief in self that our gut tells us what we, like, what do you feel you need to, if you feel you need, are you washing your hands? Are you, going through the whole check off list and letting people know you are doing all that you can and all that we know, and helping build their strengths and, working from them. That's kind of what we've been doing in our PLC, Zoom every week. And I'm trying to just really build them up and letting them know that they do come with some strengths in this. And, just listening to them. So what do you feel you need? And I think that's where the survey is going to have to come in. We're going to have to figure out some way of polling information with our staff first before the kids arrive.
Mm-hmm.
So, because I think when we think about empowerment and trauma, and I'm thinking back to domestic violence where I did a lot of work, and we being barked at and told what to do and we don't have any control is really not helpful. A lot of times we need to help them have empowerment and voice, because when people don't have empowerment, it feels almost abusive in a way, like we're told that we're not being respected for what we know. So there's a lot going on here. I spend a lot of time thinking about this.
I see so many smiling faces. That's great. I came back and everyone's just like grinning. That's a good sign. I love that. Again, yeah, wow. I was like, going back and forth in my head. Oh, should we continue this conversation? It seems rich. I don't know. Of course, we had no shortage of things to talk about. I don't know why I worry. So in my group, what really came up, which I've been thinking a lot about lately, is this trustworthiness and transparency. And I said to my group, one of the things I love about this framework from SAMHSA, all of these 6 elements are so reliant on each other, right? In order to have good collaboration, you have to have a lot of trust and a lot of safety. And in thinking about trustworthiness and transparency, especially that that transparency piece we were talking about in our interim between the breakouts, that sharing with kids and with parents about why we're being so, why the things we have to do the way we're doing them. And a member of my group, Kimberly, she brought up that building that trust with families, especially families that are struggling or from a different culture or speak a different language, to find out what they really need. Getting them to trust us, to tell us, I need food, I need, or things are fine, or, but really being able, and it's been taking a lot longer time, especially right now. And that feeling of shame. So we did spend some time talking about Brene Brown. I think maybe I'll bring her next week, right? That, that feeling of shame around not doing enough and not being able to provide, just shame around struggle, all of that, keeping families from reaching out, from being able to express their needs, and how do we step into that space, and how do we acknowledge that? So we had a really rich discussion around shame and trust and transparency. So that was excellent. Anyone else? Anyone want to share their second round? I'm trying to look really quick. There's a lot of you. It's awesome. All right, oh my gosh, tell me, Janae, did I say it right? All right, hold on, unmute you. Hold on, I'm trying. Jenna, help me. I can't unmute her. There we go. Wait, nope. We both did it. Hold on. There we go. We'll make it work. There we go. You should be unmuted now.
Okay. My name is Jenna too, so that's an easy thing to remember.
Thank you.
You keep saying thank you, Jenna, for helping, and I'm like, I'm not doing anything. So it was really a continuation of our first conversation, and it was interesting though because we got a different participant that added a different perspective. My question the first time around was, how can we support families, especially our families where I work? 41 to 42% of the families have actually logged in successfully once at a minimum to the online learning platform for schools. So we can't really depend on technology. There's a lot of barriers to that, to be the one point of outreach. And then Shannon Fox, who is in rural Idaho, and actually one person, 7 counties, is working on reducing family violence. And how can she do outreach to families if technology is not the thing in this climate? One person, 7 counties. So, we can support students and even support staff, but we can't forget about the families, and we can't just default to a Zoom chat. So what does that look like, and how are we going to do that moving forward? Especially, we heard from different states that they're already hearing next fall is not going to be, an in-person learning situation. So we can't rely on that either. So how do we support families equally?
That is such a great question. And I think what I've been trying to do, that keeps coming up so strongly, right? That digital equity piece. I want to invite a few special guests and devote a whole section just to that topic. That's what my current thinking is, because like you said, especially now that we're starting to hear the rumors trickling in that next fall is going to look like this spring, we really have to dive into that equity piece and digital equity. So yes, big question that we've been thinking about a lot. Thank you. Anyone else want to share? Jenna.
Yes.
Quinn, what did your group talk about?
You know what? I had to step away and use the bathroom, so I wasn't there. But it looks like
I'm
Karen
so sorry. Awesome. All right. Karen, did you wave your hand? All right, Karen, let's unmute you.
Hi, Laura. I can just note that in our group, we talked about trust, and then it moved to talking about locus of control. I think Laura Lockhart specifically brought that up in our group. But how are we going to have honest conversations about what people can control and they can't control, and also acknowledging the chaos of the environments we find ourselves in our particular states and communities around opening up, not opening up, divided along political lines, all of the chaos that's beyond our control. Within the context of that, what can we control, and what kids, students, families, and staff? And so that was one of the questions.
Oh, I love that. Wow.
Oh, Chris Jenkins wants.
Oh,
yeah,
thank you. Yep, Chris.
Yep. Right. Okay.
Second. There we go.
Okay. One of the things that Dale, who was in our group, said that I loved was that we kind of got thrown to the wolves to make it work, us in education. And he said, one of the things that he said that I really liked was we have to plan right and do it well. And not just hope this happened. We'll just throw this at him and see what happens, you know? So I really liked that. I wrote it down.
That's great.
Plan right and do it well.
I was going to say that again for me. Plan
right. And do it well.
And do it well.
Now, that was from Dale. I can't take credit.
I just never, I always say, I'm going to remember that. And then I never do. So I wrote it down. This is so great. Okay, we've got 3 minutes left. How does this keep happening? Okay, I'm trying to think of all the things that I want to make sure we cover before we go. Okay. Next week, I'm doing a webinar during this time slot. So I'm still going to hold this next week because you all keep showing up. I said to my group, I was like, I have this panic attack every time, like, you know, right 10 minutes before this, I'm like, no one's going to come this week. We're not going to have anything to talk about, all right. And then you guys come and so many of you join us, and we have such fruitful, wonderful conversations. It just really is wonderful. So I will definitely still hold this next week. I just have to figure out probably just even 1 hour later, I have to talk with my team and see what we can do, and I'll let you all know. I'm doing a webinar with Emily for Emote, and I should be sending out, I don't have all the details yet, but I'll probably send it out on Twitter today. But that's where I'll be next week at noon. And then as always, join ACES Connection if you're not a member. Join ACES in Education. Jenna, if your fingers are fast enough, can you put the ACES in Education link in the chat? I always try to remember to keep that saved and I forget. So yeah, we have over 2,000 members on the ACES in Education page alone, and ACES Connection has over 40,000 members. And we post articles and have these kind of discussions. There's this Better Normal series happens every week, and education isn't the only topic. So we've done health equity and trauma-informed housing, all sorts of really interesting conversations. So please, please check out the other Better Normal conversations. And they're also, oh, that was it. Jenna, do you have our YouTube link handy?
Sure,
all of these conversations. Thank you. Throw that in the chat. All of these are recorded. So not only ours, but like I said, all of these Better Normal conversations are recorded. And so someone in my group was saying they were going to go check out some of our first conversations that they had missed. So if you want to watch any of these, feel free to go to our YouTube, the ACES Connection YouTube channel. And I think it's specifically the Better Normal, but Jenna's going to put that link in the chat for us. And so you can open it and check it out. And I'll also try, Jenna, do you remember if the YouTube link It is on our homepage, isn't it?
It is on the homepage. I'm just getting the
Of
link
ACES
now.
Connection. Okay. Yeah. On ACES Connection, on the right side of the page, there we always have the registration links for this event and the other Better Normals. And I think right below it is the YouTube channel if you want to watch any of the past recorded sessions. So other than that, everyone, I just want to say thank you for continuing to show up and bringing it and having these wonderful conversations. And we will be back next week, and I'll let you know the new time for sure. I usually do it through Twitter, and we do a blog on ACES Connection, and I share it through Facebook. So, and if you can't find us, I'm going to put my email in the chat right now. If I can type, you can always email me and say, hey, oops, I can't spell. There we go. You can always, say that you can't find it, and we'll help you out. All right. So everyone be well. Please take care of yourselves, take care of your families, make sure that you spend some time taking care of yourself this week. And I will see you again next week. Bye.